right, so our next panel is going to be education legislation and issues in New Hampshire. We have Tim Baxter, who is the New Hampshire State Representative for Rockingham 20. And Tim Baxter, if you don't know, is a close friend of FreedomWorks. Don Johnson, who is the State Representative for Belknap 3. And Jim Kofalt, who is the State Representative for Hillsborough 4. So thank you guys for joining us today. Laura is going to be leading this panel discussion.
Thank you. All right, so I think you might have to turn the mics on there. We'll do a little test here. So are they working?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello? Yep.
Okay. No? All right, so if you'll take just 60 seconds, I know that a lot of us know each other here, but take 60 seconds to introduce yourself, and I'll start with you, Representative.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's really good to be back. I love FreedomWorks, what you guys fight for all across the country. It's so important. I'm a state representative. I have the pleasure of serving with Dawn and Herschel, and there's a couple other representatives in the room as well. And I'm also a small business owner, and I run a small nonprofit. And I ran for office because I was upset with corrupt politicians that were taking advantage of people's freedom. And they enrich themselves and they grow their own power by taking away our rights. And education is another example of that.
Okay, I think what we're going to try to...
Turn off the mics while you're not talking.
I think that'll work. Thank you, Representative, for that introduction.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So my name is Dawn Johnson, first year state rep. I've learned a lot, still learning. It's a never-ending process. I also sit on my Laconia school board. I'm the only conservative on the school board. I've been fighting nonstop for a long time now. We do have some new candidates coming up that are running for this next seat. We've got 2 of them. We're looking for 1 more. But I know I've got 2 daughters. They're a senior and a junior this year. And if I had the ability and the option, and it wouldn't probably do more harm than good, I would have pulled them. And when my daughters were younger and they said, "Mom, you need to homeschool me," I looked at them and I said, "Oh, you're crazy." I wish I'd taken them up on that now. I am working with Glenn. He's here today, another state rep on education. We have some great bills coming forth that we hope will help take away the power of these school board associations and these teacher associations and make it more parents' choice and what the community really needs.
Okay. Thank you.
My name is Jim Kofalt. I'm a first-term state representative from Hillsborough 4, Wilton, Lineborough, Greenville, and Francistown. And I also sit on my local school board. I was elected to that position with fairly widespread support from Democrats who were fed up with the inefficient spending and the out-of-control property tax increases that were happening in our district. And one thing that I want to say is that although I think we all see opportunities for school choice when parents can decide what is best for their children. The reality is that public schools are the default choice for a lot of kids and for a lot of families. So as a school board member, I want to make sure that people have the opportunity to choose what's best for their families. But I also want to make sure that the kids who are going to the public schools have a great experience and a great education, and that we can do our best to sort of get some of the special interest influence out of the process. I'll also add that I'm on the board of the 603 Alliance, which is a group that, a grassroots group that exists to preserve constitutional principles. We do a lot of candidate trainings, and there's been some discussion about working with the School District Governance Association. Jody Underwood is in the back of the room, and that is an outstanding group that helps elected officials to do their job and to be in charge, which is really what they're supposed to be doing, not rubber stamping. So we've talked about doing some training as well, and I talked to Kailee about seeing how maybe we can all collaborate and work together and get that done.
Well, that's great. Yes, that's what we're here for. We're here to bring all the groups together so that we're not working in silos and that we can come together in one voice. So absolutely, we'd love to work with you and all the groups that are here today. So Representative Baxter, I do have a question, because when you were in Nashville with us and you come in and there was a bill that was proposed at the time against critical race theory and banning that, and New Hampshire was right on the forefront. You all led the nation with this critical race theory. So congratulations to that. Talk to me about that bill, what it accomplished, and like we're seeing in Texas, they had a great bill too, but it got really watered down at the final hour. So talk to me about the critical race theory bill that was passed through, and what are some areas that you're seeing that you would like to still see improved in it?
Well, yeah, thanks for the question. For starters, with critical race theory, we shouldn't be teaching our kids that they're less than because of their race and that they'll never be able to succeed.
Correct.
Or that they're inherently racist because
Correct.
they're white.
Correct.
And the fact that all of your tax dollars in public schools, if that's going to teaching critical race theory, that's totally wrong. And we need to fund critical race theory.
Correct.
So that's the starting point. Now, I think there is the question, and I'm curious to hear what my fellow panelists think and other representatives in the room about what we accomplished in the end and if it got watered down. I know there's a debate about what we truly accomplished, but I think we took a good first step in New Hampshire, and the question is, are we going to be able to adequately enforce the intent of what we tried to pass, which is to say that we're not going to teach divisive concepts in New Hampshire, because it's essentially brainwashing our kids.
Right.
Great, that's great. So I'll pass that on down. What do you see that, this is a great start, but where else do you see it could improve?
Thank you for the question. One of the things I know, talking to our Commissioner of Education, he is behind us on this, and one of the things that we made sure we put in the bill, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we actually put some teeth in the game, where that if we find these teachers are teaching this, and the schools are calling it something else, they're not calling it CRT, they're calling it Diversity Inclusion Task Force, or Diversity Inclusion. So you need to know the key words, because they're saying, I'm not teaching that. Well, yeah, they just changed the name. But if they are teaching this and they are trying to push it in your schools, the Department of Ed now has the teeth to go after them, pull their licenses, stop them from teaching. I want to put in a bill and I'm working on the exact language that would not only stop them, but let everybody know that they have had their license pulled for this reason. Right now, if something happens, if a teacher gets reprimanded, whether it's on a local level or a state level, nobody has the right to see that because they're saying it's too private. Well, that's not fair. Those are the people that are teaching our kids. I want to change that, so I'm working on a bill for that.
Sorry about this, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, make sure. I'm not sure, I might just.
You know what we'll do? Why don't we you two share a mic if you don't mind?
Yes, right. Yeah. Yes, too much feedback. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about this, guys.
All right.
Here we
This
go.
one works. So, first of all, when we talk about the critical race theory bill,
No,
I think it's
bring him that
off
down.
and on a little bit. When we talk about the critical race theory bill, I always like to point out that when this whole thing started, it was, I think it was dead out of the starting gate. Okay? Representative Keith Ammon, I still remember this early call in the process. He said, you know, I put this bill out there to ban the teaching of divisive concepts, and you know I'm going to take a lot of arrows in the back, but I'd love some cover. So if you guys could, you know, join me in trying to make this happen. And that's political courage and it's foresight, and I did not think this had any chance of passing, but as the legislative session proceeded, it really started to gain steam. I heard from a lot of constituents that hadn't read the bill, didn't understand what it was about, and thought that this was silencing free speech.
Right.
And so sometimes we need to be careful about how we talk about these things. I refer to this as Tim did, defunding critical race theory. We're taking our tax dollars away from teaching hate. And so, you know, ultimately, the Senate did put some teeth in it. That was good. They took a few things out of it. You know, there were some things in there about, you know, you can't teach that the state of New Hampshire or the United States are fundamentally racist. They took that out. So, you know, there are some things that were, it could have been a little bit better, but, you know, all in all, I think it was a really big success, and I'm really grateful to everybody who helped make it happen.
Right, okay, well that's great, and I'm going to go back to Representative Johnson. When I talked to you on the phone and you told me that you were state rep and school board member, I'm like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe someone would want to put themselves through that. But okay.
And she's running for mayor now.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
You need to vote for Dawn.
Okay. So you brought up a really good point, and this is what we're seeing across the country, is that even in the state of Florida, we have Governor DeSantis that said no critical race theory. We have other governors that have said, and state legislators that said no critical race theory, but there's not any enforcement of it. So here in New Hampshire, if a parent sees that the ideologies of critical race theory is being taught in the classroom, what steps would they need to take to report that, and how would they report it to the state?
So, thanks. So from my understanding, and it's been a little while since I read all the details, and they were still working out a lot of details, is you take the information and you bring it to, there's a form and a step process on the Department of Ed's website, and you bring it to them, and then they start investigating the process from there. You can bring it to your principal of the school, you can bring it to your superintendent of the school board. My recommendation is just go right to the state. I mean,
If I may, there are also some people who've been very active and very instrumental in getting that bill passed, who have legal resources standing by waiting to file suit. So Dan Richards, who has been a champion of this, has really put his money where his mouth is. He has attorneys waiting to go. Does anybody know the URL? I want to say it's protectourkids.org. Yes.
Defend our kids.
Defendourkids.org. And so you can not only report it to the state, but you can report it through defendourkids.org, and they have the resources to make it happen.
Okay, wonderful. And I think something's, you must have something in you that.
Or
that
it
might
might be the speaker. We'll try and figure this out.
I'm like, when it gets down to you, it's not working. I don't know what that is, but okay, let's jump into Don, you kind of touched on this. What can we expect coming up this next legislative session? And I'm going to give you all a chance. And what are you personally working on? Because really what we're seeing is the lack of parental rights right now. I mean, from all these mandates, the lack of transparency to see the curriculum. What do you have here in New Hampshire for transparency and parental rights? And talk to us about what's coming up this session.
so Okay, maybe, there we go. So I know there was several legislations that have been put in, one in particular, it will be to,
See if this works.
it will be to defund any tax dollars going to any associations, and that means you can't use federal, state, or local taxes from our people to fund the association fees. I know there's so many more. They have just come out. We're still sifting through them all. Tim, do you know any more? I know that's the top one that I have in my head that I think we need to push the hardest for, because once you take the meat and their funding out away from them, they don't have a leg to stand on.
Okay.
I would say the most important thing is to expand on school choice.
Oh, I love
A
that.
part of our budget
Really?
is we cut taxes, spending, a lot of great things, but we created school choice. Then we should expand that to every child in New Hampshire. No one should be forced into a failing school because of their zip code. It's just wrong. And ultimately, if you give people the option to go somewhere else, if there's competition, that's going to provide the best possible education for our children.
Oh, okay.
All of us politicians, we love to talk.
Yeah.
But you look at what's happened, things like forcing masks on schools, things like teaching CRT. That is all things, examples of getting away from what education should be about. Teaching our kids math, reading, science, skills they need to be in the workforce. And so we need school choice so we can have schools that are doing exactly what they're supposed to for our
Amen.
kids.
Amen.
So there was a survey that just come out this past week that did show that, it wasn't a surprise to me, and it probably isn't a surprise to most of you in here, but the enrollment in the traditional public schools are down from last year. And it showed that the increase was parents are going to charter school, they're going homeschool, they're going private school, because how much do you think parents can take? I mean,
Amen.
first the schools weren't going to open. Then the parents are seeing what the children are being taught, right? CRT, the ideologies of all that. And then the mask mandates, and now we're hearing about the vaccinations, and parents are just fed up. So, and I do appreciate your push for school choice, because parents need to be able to have that final decision, no matter what your zip code is. So I appreciate that.
On that school choice option, the bill that we passed is a great bill to start with. It's a stepping stone. There is still more work to be done. One of the pieces is to lift the income barriers that we had to put on in order to get the bill passed. So I know there's legislation going in to help raise that limit or remove it completely.
Okay.
So again, to acknowledge somebody who has really been instrumental in making the school choice happen, Representative Cordelli, the chair of education, is here. And this is something that he and others in this state have been fighting for years, and we got it done this year. And I think it was, as Don said, it is a stepping stone. It's means tested. We can increase the level of income people can have to participate in that. There is another bill, HB 607, was retained in committee, and that would be enabling legislation that would essentially authorize school districts with a 3/5 vote of the legislative body, which means the people, the voters in the school district, to adopt additional school choice provisions, and would further empower parents in that district to with additional funding and choices around education. So House Bill 607 was retained, which means that it's now being worked on by a subcommittee. It can be brought back, and or it is being brought back, and that's one of the ways that we can expand school choice. The other thing I wanted to comment on was this, Don mentioned the sort of defunding the associations. The New Hampshire School Boards Association and similar organizations on the municipal side, the New Hampshire Municipal Association, accept dues from your local school board or from your town, and I would argue that in many cases they represent the interest of the school board and the education establishment more than they represent the interest of the taxpayers and the parents. What is at issue here specifically is the use of those taxpayer funds for lobbying. And so while it is contrary to New Hampshire law to use state funds for lobbying, there is nothing saying that you cannot use local taxpayer funds for lobbying. So the New Hampshire School Boards Association took dues from school board, virtually every school board, if not every school board in the state. They apportioned part of that to lobby aggressively against school choice. So your local tax dollars, you have contributed to the lobbying effort against school choice, whether you wanted to or not. So Representative Cordelli's bill will make that illegal. It'll basically say if you cannot use those local taxpayer dollars for that purpose. So I think, those are some really outstanding changes that I think, that one's going to be an uphill battle, but, I think we could make it happen this year.
Well, I do appreciate that, because being on the school board, I do know that, and here's the thing, I'm out meeting with parents, building these parent groups up, and we have the media saying, why do you feel the need to build a group of parents, an army of parents? But here's the thing, we have the Superintendent's Association with the lobbyists. We have the teachers' unions with the lobbyists. We have the School Board Association with the lobbyists. But I'm going to tell you, they don't like it that we're organizing and we're coming together. And it's very expensive, these fees. Dawn, for the school board, is it a lump sum? Because normally it's about between $5,000 to $15,000, depending on the size of your board.
So we have a board of 7. It's 6 wards and then an at-large for a tiebreaker. And I did some research to find out, because until all this craziness started happening, I didn't really look at it. And I didn't put the connections together until I started getting involved in politics. I didn't pay attention to history class, so I've got a lot of catching up to do. But I found over the last 3 years, the Laconia School District has spent anywhere from $13,000 to $16,000 per year on association fees. School board, teachers association, and any other little association that someone wanted to belong to in the school district. I found that horrifying when they're telling us they can't afford this or they can't afford that, but they're going to spend $16,000 on association fees of my taxpayer money. I'm not okay with that. And then I found out in the state of New Hampshire, you have to, it is in law, that you have to keep your association fees in a separate account to show how it's being paid for. There are school districts who are not doing that. My school district was one of them. I have brought it.
Only one school district in the state is doing that.
So I have brought it to the attention of the Department of Ed and our school district, and I said, you need to have a separate bank account, not a separate journal entry, a separate bank account that shows where that money is coming from to pay those association fees, because it cannot come from taxpayer funds.
Right, that's great. I'm gonna jump on over to another very important question, because what we are seeing, like in Rhode Island, there was a parent that was sued by the Teachers Association because she put in too many public records requests, and they didn't want to disclose what the teacher felt offended that she had to disclose what was being taught to the kindergartners. And so the Teachers Association / union come out, and they actually filed a suit. That's how they're bullying parents and trying to make them sit down, shut up, and go away, but we're not. But what is being done right here in New Hampshire to make sure that parents have the right to see that curriculum that their kids are being taught?
Well, one of the things we did last session is we passed a law that would require civics is taught in schools. Because that's another problem, and I've seen this, you know, it's Hollywood, it's politicians, and it's universities. And it's not just universities, it's all the way down to, unfortunately, even to kindergarten sometimes, where people are being taught to hate America, they're not being taught the Constitution. There's such a ignorance of how our constitutional republic functions, and that ultimately is because of brainwashing that goes on in our schools. And so ultimately what this comes down to is a lack of political courage. You know, as Jim was talking about the work that Glenn Cordelli and Keith Ammon on CRT, that took political courage to stand up and go against the grain. And I think a lot of the people are waking up. That's why there's so much outrage about CRT, and that's why parents are requesting that they know exactly what's being taught. But we need more politicians that have political courage to fight back and are less concerned about being polite or their political future and more concerned about doing what's best for our kids.
Amen. Amen, son.
So we're talking about the transparency. How can parents access the curriculum that that's in the classroom?
So my biggest thing is I've always been an involved parent. My daughters don't like it, I do. My daughter came home the other day and she started talking to me about the transgender that they were talking about in her school classroom, in her health class, and I was like, excuse me? She's just turned 16 today. And I'm like, well, what are they talking about? Because I can understand talking about it to the point where you have the definition, you know it exists, and move on. But it's not something you should be teaching in a classroom. In the way she was explaining to me, didn't make sense. So I left my job for about an hour the other day when they had open house, and I went and talked to this teacher directly, face to face, with no mask on. Superintendent gave me the evil eye the whole time. Don't care.
Well, I mean,
But the teacher said what she did in her class, because I was very blunt. I said, if you're teaching transgender in my class to my daughter, I'm going to tell you right now, you better stop. I said, because I don't believe in it. There are two sexes, male and female.
Correct.
And even the animals in the wild know this.
Amen.
I got two ducks to prove it.
The animals don't.
And she said what she did, and she did not, my daughter misunderstood, she's going to correct it. But she said she gave them a definition of what transgender was, so they understood the difference between transgender, which is just changing your outside appearance, being clothes or hairstyle, and then the definition of going through the surgical transformations from the outside. But it doesn't change the insides. You can't change the inside of a male and you can't change the inside of a female. She goes, that was what I told and explained to the difference. I said, well, that I can understand, so they understand the difference. I said, what else did you talk about? We didn't talk about anything. We moved on. So I haven't had a chance to talk to my daughter to say, where are you coming up with all this other stuff? Because from your teacher's standpoint, that's not what you talked about. So I don't know if the teacher's lying or if my daughter's been talking to her friends and interpreted it as one conversation. But I was very explicit to my teacher in my school district. I will not tolerate this.
That's right.
And if I find out otherwise, we will have a huge discussion at our next school board meeting. I can guarantee that.
so we're seeing this across the country. You bring up this topic here. They have taken critical race theory, the ideologies, are putting it into diversity, equity, inclusion, and they've rolled it into social and emotional learning. Do we send our kids to school so that they can learn other people's opinion and other people's definition? We send our kids to school because we want them to learn how to read. We want to teach them, we want them to be taught how to write. We want them to know math, how to add. And I'm seeing this. I saw this on the board. I was in the grocery store and there was a young lady, well actually it was in a department store, and she was asking her mom, Mom, it's $9.99, it says 20% off. How much is that? And here we have a 16-year-old child that can't figure 20% off $9.99. Those are basic skills that we're not sending our kids into the world with that they need, but yet they have time for this social and emotional engineering. That's why we need to come together and we have to take these school boards back.
Right.
So, as far as transparency in curriculum is concerned, I think, one of the best tools we have is RSA 91A. For those of you who aren't from New Hampshire, that is our FOIA. That is our Freedom of Information. And the school districts will sometimes do everything they can to not answer the question, which is why it's helpful to have groups like Right to Know New Hampshire, which helps people to navigate that and get the information that they're looking for. I haven't seen Arthur Green yet, but and I don't know if Donna's coming today, but Donna Green filed a lawsuit a couple of years ago because the school district said, well, we'll provide you with that information, but you have to provide us with a USB drive sealed in its original packaging, and she had to drive, an hour and a half to the offices to provide that, and then leave it with them and come back. And so she filed suit saying, hey, you're making it awfully hard to get information that you could just email to me.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, she lost that suit, I believe. Still going?
No, it passed at the Supreme Court level.
Oh, okay. So, so she prevailed, is what you're saying? Okay, good.
Great.
So it takes that kind of stick-to-itiveness to really get what we need here. You mentioned social emotional learning. The other thing is I think people need to be very tuned into, how can I'm trying to be polite and not use off-color language. They need to have their gibberish detectors turned on. And, there's people like Anne-Marie Banfield who does a phenomenal job of helping people navigate that. I also know that Jody and Dan Richards were working on a pledge, and I'm not sure what the status of that pledge is, but one of those is, as a school board member, I promise to do the following things. And one of those was, I'm going to be careful about the latest educational trends coming along, and I'm going to question those. And so, we need to constantly be doing that. But ultimately, school boards need to know that they are responsible for curriculum, no matter what the staff in their school district says, and that they're in control and parents have a right to see it.
All right, great. So we have about 15 minutes for this panel, I believe. Is that right, Kailee? I want to open it up to the floor for some questions, and try to keep your questions short so that we can get as many in as possible.
Thank you, Laura. Mine is kind of a question and information. We just discussed the CRT legislation. Well, I'm a member of a school board as well. And the New Hampshire School Board Association is evil.